Chad, where the Toyota War turned pickups into weapons. Today, we're exploring this African gem and everything it holds. Stay tuned to find out more about this intriguing military strategy. Chad is an expansive Central African nation with diverse geographic landscapes. Covering over 490,000 square miles, Chad stretches from the arid Sahara in its north to fertile savannas in its south. The northern half of Chad features the rocky Sahara and semi-arid Sahelian grasslands south of that. Further south, the Central Plateau region has scrub forests and grassy highlands. Elephants and antelope roam here. The capital, N'Djamena, sits along the Shari River. Lush savannas and wetlands make up Chad's southern third, which gets more rain. The second largest city, Sar, and economic center Moundou are in the southern regions. Flowing rivers, wetlands, and small hills characterize the terrain where most Chadians live and farm. Lake Chad also occupies part of the country's southwest, near the Nigerian border. The earliest records show the kingdom of Kanem present in Chad around the 9th century AD. Located around Lake Chad, Kanem prospered for centuries through trade. At its peak in the 1200s, Kanem controlled territory across parts of Libya, Niger, and Nigeria. Eventually, the kingdom declined, giving rise to the new kingdom of Bornu in the late 1400s. It wasn't until the 1890s that the French military began their conquest of modern-day Chad. Setting up their first major colonial outpost in 1900, the French incorporated the territories of Kanem, Bornu, Bagirmi, and Wadai into their new colony of French Equatorial Africa. The French ruled their colonies with an authoritarian style, providing little autonomy. As winds of change swept across Africa in the 1950s and 60s, Chad began to push for its independence. Under François Tambelbe, Chad gained independence from France in 1960. But Tambelbe's authoritarian rule triggered dissent, and by 1965, a civil war broke out. This instability set the tone for decades of civil war and unrest to follow. Most notably, Chad and Libya erupted into a conflict known as the Toyota War in 1987. It got this name because Chadian troops outmaneuvered Libyan brigades using Toyota pickups fitted with anti-aircraft guns over the desert terrain. Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi had occupied the uranium-rich Al Yuzu Strip in Chad's north since the 1970s. After many failed diplomatic attempts, Chadian forces finally pushed Libyan troops back across the border in decisive surprise attacks. Today, Chad still faces major internal security threats from rebel groups and external pressures from conflict overflow in neighboring countries. However, recent oil production, beginning in 2003, offers some hope for economic development. The Saharan and Sahelian country of Chad has a very diverse population of hundreds of ethnic groups and languages. Chad's strategic location in Central Africa has resulted in a blending of different peoples throughout its history. More than 200 ethnic groups reside in Chad. In the north live tribes like the Zaghawa, or People of the South as they call themselves. The Tubu and Goran people are other northerners adapted to desert life. In southern Chad dwell dozens of black African ethnicities like the Sera, Ngambe, and Mbe. Intermarriage has brought kinship between many northern and southern peoples. Most Chadian Arabs and Tuaregs are bilingual or trilingual. Over 120 indigenous languages or dialects belong to Afroasiatic, Nilo-Saharan, and Niger-Congo language families. Arabic and French are also official languages in Chad. However, Jula, or Chadian Arabic, has become the common language for many Chadians of diverse backgrounds. Sera and Ngambi people predominantly speak variations of their own languages. An estimated 55 to 60% of Chadians are Muslim, while 35 to 40% follow Christianity. A small minority also follow indigenous religions. Most Muslims adhere to more mystical and relaxed Sufi traditions influenced by sub-Saharan Africa. Christians largely belong to the Roman Catholic or Protestant denominations. Indigenous religions honor ancestral spirits, forces of nature, and sacred places. Chad is one of the poorest and least developed countries in the world, with around 40% of Chadians living below the poverty line. The World Bank estimates Chad's GDP is around $12.7 billion as of 2022. Oil production and export drive Chad's modern economy. Oil extraction began in 2003 through a pipeline to neighboring Cameroon and now accounts for over 90% of Chad's exports. However, volatile global oil prices lead to peaks and troughs in growth. Mismanagement of oil revenues also channels profits to political elites over national development. Outside of oil, agriculture employs nearly 80% of Chad's labor force but faces low productivity. Subsistence farming of millet, grains, and livestock grazing supports rural populations. Just 3 to 5% of the land is irrigated for cultivation. Recurrent droughts and floods demonstrate existing challenges for the agricultural sector. Landlocked between Libya, Sudan, Central African Republic, Nigeria, and Cameroon, Chad faces regional instability and internal turmoil shaping its diplomatic maneuvering. Since independence in 1960, Chad has suffered authoritarian rule and civil conflict, leaving a fragile state threatened by rebel groups and ethnic tensions. Chad borders turbulent nations like Darfur, embattled Sudan, and post-Gaddafi Libya, causing refugee overflows, cross-border raids, and arms trafficking. Boko Haram also conducts attacks from Nigeria. To gain allies, Chad sent troops backing neighbors against insurgents. Its participation in France's Sahel-wide counterterrorism operations further entangles Chad in regional conflicts, even while seeking stability. Their partnerships extend beyond former colonial ruler France and Central African associates to unlikely allies. China provides Chad with infrastructure loans, while Western powers support its counter-terror contributions. However, oil wealth alignment with authoritarian regimes in Chad and elsewhere generates condemnation. Music remains integral to Chad's cultural DNA, with signature instruments like the kakaki trumpet signaling military victories, while lyrical poets known as griots use song to share history across generations. Woodwind and percussion dominate compositions, fusing Arabic North African sounds with sub-Saharan rhythms in celebrations of identity. Equally important, Chad's visual landscape conveys meaning through paintings depicting village scenes, architectural designs seen in spherical thatched roofs, and vibrant mask carvings drawing from mythological spiritual imagery. Styles blend realism with abstraction to emphasize cultural symbols, as contemporary fine artists also contribute installations and sculpture. Chad is home to a vibrant culinary tradition that beautifully blends African, Arabic, and French influences. Despite its diverse influences, Chadians maintain a strong food culture that makes hearty use of local crops and livestock, like labouli, a thick, creamy breakfast porridge made from rice or wheat, cooked with milk, flour, and peanut butter. It has a soft, smooth texture and a nutty, sweet flavor. La bouillie is frequently customized with extra toppings like fruit, nuts, or cinnamon. Jarret de Boeuf, a slowly braised beef stew named chine of beef in French. It contains beef cooked until tender for over 2 hours, along with vegetables like carrots, sweet potatoes, leeks, eggplants, and greens. The rich stew is served warm in bowls with bread or rice to soak up the savory sauce. Ayash, a popular Chadian appetizer or side, made from millet flour dough rolled into balls and dipped into various sauces. The mild millet base soaks up flavorful accompaniments like thick peanut sauce, spinach dip, or a spicy pepper mix. Daraba, a hearty Chadian peanut and vegetable stew featuring a sauce made from ground peanut paste, diced tomatoes, okra, sweet potatoes, eggplants, spinach, or other greens. Turmeric, ginger, and cayenne pepper add zesty flavor. Daraba is spooned over rice, boiled cassava, or fried plantains. Bongo, a Chadian lamb and sweet potato stew, seasoned with fragrant spices like ginger, garlic, onions, and tomatoes with bouillon for a savory touch. Some variations include additional vegetables or legumes. Bongo is served warm over fluffy couscous or white rice as a main meal. If you enjoyed this video on Chad, you'll love this next one. If you enjoyed this video about Chad, you're definitely going to love this next one.